I'm impressed this engine ran at all. That's one nasty spark plug.
Hey all, it's a lovely day on the wet coast. I'm going to take advantage of it. I'm going to do some miscellaneous things on Olive, the 2-ton tent, our Dodge B350 van. I've got some weird noises coming from the engine at certain times. I suspect it's nothing serious. I think it's the idler pulley on the engine, and I'm going to have a look at that right now. That's an idler pulley. It just guides the belts around the system. Goes to the alternator there, and then down below, if I get my phone down there, you can see the two belts wrapping around the crankshaft pulley there. There's the fan / power steering belt as well. This idler pulley just part of the system, but here's some bad noises, and I think it's coming from this. This is a bit more play left and right. Well, laterally, radially, I don't know. It's loose, and I think the bearings are probably shot, so I'm just going to take this off today, have a look. I've got to take it off anyways at some point because I got to replace the alternator. I'm going to replace the starter motor as well, but I'm not going to do that right now. Anyways, I'm going to get at it. At this point, I realize I might as well remove the alternator. I've got a new one. This one is pretty beat up, and it doesn't spin very freely. The belts were actually slipping on the pulley because of the resistance. So I'm going to remove the top bolt here, or top nut, and there's another one down here. Get this out of the way. I may not replace it today because it looks like I'm going to have to replace this idler pulley over there anyways. So the idler pulley seems fine, the bearing seems okay, there's no slop in there, but I feel that there should be a lot more in there than just this wobbly loose bolt. Like, it should be more of a shaft, or there should be a bushing in there, because this can just like flop around. I mean, it's being held in place by the tension of the belts on it, but it doesn't seem right. I'll have to figure something out for this. Maybe make a bushing or something to go over the bolt, or machine a bolt. Who knows? I'll figure it out. Well, I figure I'm halfway to having the alternator out already. I might as well complete the job. I've thrown a little penetrant on these nuts here that I have to undo. There's like 6 of them, 5 of them. Once I get those out, I should be able to just pull the alternator right out because I already have the mounting bolts already done. Before you do any work on your electrical system or anything that's connected to your electrical system, make sure you disconnect your battery. Right now I'm working on the terminals of the alternator that are live if the battery was connected, and if my socket slipped, I could short to ground, and that would be really bad. So I got the alternator out. There's the old one next to the new one, and you can see my next challenge. That's for a serpentine belt. That's for the twin V belts that my van has. Next thing I need to do, well, not swap these, but move that one onto this one. On this particular van, the nut holding the pulley to the alternator shaft is a 22mm. If you're brave / adventurous, you've got a good grip, you can just hang onto the pulley, hit it with your impact wrench. Otherwise, chuck the pulley up in the jaws of a vise, protect the pulley with a bit of like cloth or something, give it a good squeeze, and that nut should come right off. You're wearing your goggles, right? Sometimes old rusty stuff just does not want to cooperate, so apply a little leverage, a bit of heat, some penetrating oil, a screwdriver, a bit of brute force and stupidity, and you'll usually get your way. Done. Now I'm just going to put the new nut back on with the old pulley, hit it with the impact wrench, and it's good to be reinstalled again. So I guess on these alternators, this is a great big roll pin, and I guess I use this alternator on probably a wide variety of vehicles. The length from that point there to that point there is a little bit too long for my bolt, but I know I have some clearance in here, so I'm just gonna tap it in just a little bit. And that way I can get some threads started, or some threads exposed on this end so I can get my nut started, and then that roll pin should just squeeze in to match the width of the mount right here. Now I don't want to go too far, otherwise I have to start tapping it back out again, so just a little bit. That should be enough.
And that's that. Old pulley, new alternator. Now to put the thing back in.
Pretty easy to reinstall. Just hang the top hole of the alternator on the bolt that's sticking out of the upper adjuster. Put it in place, kind of persuade it a little bit, then slip the bottom bolt back in. Super easy.
Now you can see I have just enough thread sticking out of that roll pin that I can catch it with the nut and tighten it, and that will squeeze it in as far as it needs to go.
Okay, that is done. I have the new alternator in. I've got the wires all connected back up. I've got brand new alternator belts which run off of the engine pulley. I've tensioned them to about a 1/2 inch of deflection between the idler pulley and the alternator pulley. I'm not going to worry too much about the idler pulley itself. I could tell that the bearings on it were not that bad. I mean, they weren't noisy at all, and there was no slop in them, so I just put it back and I'll keep an eye on it, and I'll think about making something to, bush that properly in the actual bearing itself. But for now, if it works, I'm not going to worry about it. So I figured out, now that I've got the alternator installed and I happen to have the heat riser off, I can see this spark plug. Because I can see this spark plug, that means I can go ahead and I can replace it. And then I thought, well, what the hell, if I'm replacing the spark plug, might as well replace the ignition wires too. I have them. I planned on replacing them anyways. And that got me to thinking, well, if I'm placing the spark plug in the ignition wires, might as well replace the rotor and the ignition coil, because I've bought those too. I'm going to get into it.
I find it to be a good practice to check the spark plug gap with a feeler gauge every time I put a new one in. You never know if it might have been dropped in the store. On older engines like this, what I like to do is mark the cylinder the spark plug came from when I'm changing out new spark plugs. And that way I can check the engine condition over time. If I've got one plug that's fouling or one that's running lean, then it shows me that the condition of the engine might not be optimal and I can look into fixing that. Simple to do. Yeah, maybe it appeals to my hoarder skills, but it's worked for me in the past. Both banks of plugs are done now. It's time to upgrade the ignition system. So I've got a new rotor, distributor cap, and ignition wires and spark plugs, so I'm not going to ruin anything by leaving the old ignition coil in. The damn thing's like 35 years old, so I've got a brand new one. Success! First time too. I am very happy. And that's the ignition system refreshed. New spark plugs, new ignition wires, new distributor cap, new distributor rotor, new ignition coil, because that's the original one and it's seen better days. We've got the voltmeter connected up to the battery. The battery is reading 12.37 volts. If everything works with the new alternator, I should see that around 14. I'm going to start the motor now and we'll see what happens. 13.9 volts. I'll take it. I'm happy to see at an idle I've got 13 plus volts, which means the battery will still be charging if we're stuck idling in traffic for any length of time. I also, as a side effect, managed to tighten up the power steering belt because I had to get it out of the way to get the new drive belts for the alternator in. So I'm pretty happy about that. Anyways, I hope that was a fun video for you. Thanks for watching.